Hi everybody, welcome to Shivers. Today we're doing a new movie review for the latest horror movie that has released to theaters, and that is Evil Dead Burn. This came out on July 10th. Right now it sits at a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. I will go through the whole synopsis of the story, so if you want it to be spoiler free, just fast forward to the end for the actual rating. So, getting into the story of Evil Dead Burn, this does pick up assumedly where Evil Dead Rise has sort of left off. So we have this sort of random deadite in the lake that is taking care of poor fishermen who are there in the wrong place at the wrong time. So off the bat, we have a very similar start to the movie that we had for Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead Rise, we started at the lake as well, and now we're back there. To me, already off the bat, it's not a great start because it has nothing to do with our main family. So, not directly. But inside of our main family, the people who we're really focused on, we have Joseph and his spouse or his girlfriend, Tyla. We don't hear her name at all until later in the story, so it's just Joseph and his girlfriend. We have Alice and Will. They are really like our main people, so Will and Alice are married. Alice is French, so she has these moments of like speaking a different language. It's very interesting. We'll talk about that. But we then have Susan and Edgar. So we have the mom and the dad of the situation as well. So Will and Joseph are brothers, and Will and Alice, as a married couple, are in a very, very bad marriage. I think you can kind of use your imagination. The majority of this entire movie, from a deeper perspective, is all about domestic violence. It's all about what does that look like from a physical perspective? What does that look like from an emotional perspective? What does that look like from an abandonment perspective? And we're seeing all three of those play out with all three of the couples that we have in this movie. So with Will and Alice, it's much more direct. It's much more physical abuse. Alice keeps having all of these flashbacks to this specific moment in a kitchen. And Will is the owner of this restaurant, which is where they start their whole escapade, is that it is Joseph's birthday. And so Will and Alice supposedly got this gift for him together, but they didn't. Alice still went out and got her own gift for Joseph, kind of like tipsy, drunkenly kisses him on the lips. And she's like, oh, it's a French thing, we just share our love to everyone. To which not only Joseph's girlfriend and Will are both incredibly uncomfortable, but it's very evident that Alice just wants out from Will. So they get into this huge fight in the beginning at Joseph's birthday, and Alice says, I hope you go to hell. And Will's like, great, I'm going. So he grabs his keys, he's about to leave. They try to stop him because they're like, no, you've been drinking, you can't be driving. And he's like, get out of my way, I don't care. So he drives down the road, and that deadite from the lake from the very beginning of the movie is just standing on the side of the road waiting for Will to happen, to come down the road. So it is a little bit of like this fated moment, like this was sort of meant to happen. But she walks into the middle of the road, Will hits her, flips his car. All of Evil Dead begins at that point. The car lights on fire, and that's that. Now, we jump to the family dynamic of having a funeral, and even though they seem to be this sort of like illustrious family, they don't have anyone come to the funeral. So I thought that that was strange. The mom, Susan, is so high and mighty about her son, and Will is like this prestigious kid, and they even have the restaurant and all that stuff. So I can only make the assumption that it's a private family funeral, but I felt like with all that hype, it should have been tons and tons of people. And I think that would have saved this movie if it was, because then you would have almost like a cleansing hour situation with the deadites where they could essentially impact and possess all of these people who are in attendance at the funeral, not just focusing on the family. I know that that's not the point of the movie, but I do think that that would have made it a much more exciting direction. So to continue, we have this private funeral for the family. It's very cumbersome. There's construction going on in the background. There's like it's a horrible experience. It's a horrible grieving process. And they take the casket and they wheel him back to the crematorium. But it doesn't make any sense to me because he was in a car that literally blew up. So, okay, anyway. So I'm pointing all of this out because already 20 minutes into the movie, there's a lot of discrepancies. So Will has now passed. The family's mad at Alice. Alice has this guilty conscience because the last thing she said to him was go to hell. But what we then find out is that the whole family's grandfather was part of the Wise Men. And for original Evil Dead and for the Army of Darkness, it's all focusing on this Kandarian dagger. And so these Deadites want to find the Wise Men so that they can grab the Kandarian dagger and then they have all of the power. If you stab a Deadite with the Kandarian dagger, you get to sort of set that person's soul free. So let's say I were to get possessed and then I get stabbed with this dagger, I might not live, but at least my soul will be intact and in my body, and I'm not going to be possessed by something crazy. So Joseph, who has inherited this house that's part of the family, we never also understand why he has this house, has left it to sort of rot, and everything upstairs in the attic is all the grandfather's. So as he's combing through all the grandfather stuff, he's playing the tapes that we hear every single Evil Dead. He's reading the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon. He's making copies. So it's a little bit of a Ring situation where, this is never going to end because there are copies out there. There are conversations out there. He's probably posting to Reddit. Who has any idea? I don't know. But Joseph's the one who started this, essentially, is to say, even though it did come from the family lineage. So Joseph is also in possession of the Kandarian dagger. So as this Deadite comes from the lake, essentially kills Will, it now starts to transition towards the family. So the father, Edgar, goes down to where the crematorium is, a cremator is, in the funeral home, and is talking to the guy, and he's like, I just want to say goodbye to my son one more time. So the guy's like, yeah, no problem. I'll give you 5 minutes. So as Edgar is down there with the casket, he hears pounding from the inside of the casket. Very predictable. As you would imagine, dead Will comes and opens the casket and possesses Edgar. So now Edgar is next. So as they're going home, he's getting more and more agitated. And this is when all of the chaos ensues. So it's pretty quick transition from everything that has happened to Will and sort of the background that we're getting on this family, and then just immediately into action, which is kind of nice. The other thing that I'll mention is Susan, the mother. I do not know why they cast her. I think she's a really, really bad actress. I think the biggest complaint for Evil Dead Rise before this movie was the child that's in the movie, who's just like really horrible in terms of acting, and I think it took me and a lot of other people out of that movie. This to me felt like the same thing, just not as bad. Like, she's supposed to be this mother who's taking care of everything for her family, who thinks that Will is this perfect son, who also has her mother living with them, but she's bitter, but she's not committed to being bitter. Like, she's kind in pockets, and I don't really like that. So outside of my own opinion, we have Susan, who's the mother. Her mother is at home, who has dementia. Another gripe I have is that this mother who has dementia is solely put there for comedic relief. I know that from the original Evil Dead and onward, comedic relief has been something that's been like a staple of this franchise, but I do think that Evil Dead from 2013 still reigns supreme because there's no break. It is a scary movie. It is a scary topic, and you don't get to really look away. This was a deeper topic that could have been talked about so much more because you do have those puddles of reflection of domestic abuse, emotional abuse, abandonment, and to not completely lean in and leave all of that up to interpretation for audiences, as opposed to then pulling in comedic relief to say like, oh, it's okay, this is for everybody. It shouldn't be. Like, to me, I think there's a horror fans almost like hipster moment of saying like, Evil Dead is ours. It's not for the general public. It's not for just your casual watcher of horror movies. Evil Dead is something that's like, it's a staple that's really there. And I feel like the comedic relief from this grandmother really, really took that away. There was like someone with a kid in the movie theater, that for an Evil Dead movie that shouldn't happen. So I was very disappointed with that. But Susan is now just completely distraught at this point in the movie because her perfect son has passed away. She does not like Alice because she feels like Will and Alice got married just like super quickly and they didn't really have a say and it wasn't the most traditional and all of these things. However, we also have a moment where Alice says that she and Will got married in the house that they're in, but the mother says like, oh, he brought a French bride. So it gives the vibe of like a shotgun Las Vegas wedding in France, but then they came back and had a wedding with the family, but then the family doesn't like her. So like, why would they have gotten married in the first place? There's a lot of questions there. So Edgar is now possessed and he decides to drive this car super fast with Joseph and Joseph's girlfriend inside the car. So Alice and Susan and the grandmother are at home. And this is when more possession starts to take place. So he starts attacking Joseph's girlfriend and Joseph bounces. So here we have the avoidance side of things. So we've now seen the domestic abuse, but now we've seen a completely like you're on your own situation, which is horrible. So Joseph leaves. Now Joseph's girlfriend is possessed. She comes to the door, and this is what we see in the trailer, where she's pulling the seat cushion from her face and all her fingers are chopped off. So it's an interesting, I think it's a really cool effect for gore. I wish they didn't put it in the actual trailer, but it's just complete chaos after that. And it goes from person to person. This is also, I would say, and please tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, one of the first examples where we've seen the Deadites acting almost as if they're like vampires. Like they have to scratch you or if they bite you or if they put some sort of saliva on you. At one point, Joseph's girlfriend, as the possessed Deadite, goes up to the grandmother, takes her dentures out, licks her dentures, and puts them back in her mouth. And then that's enough to make her possessed. So I don't like that. I don't like that it has to be some sort of like physical contact, even in terms of the vampire thing. Like we had a moment where Susan is upstairs taking care of her mother and her husband who's just standing outside. Now everybody knows that he's possessed. He's floating up to the second story and trying to get her attention. She opens the window, but it's a very like let the right one in moment. And these are demons that can literally fly. They can fly through objects. They can boil water, but they can't open front doors and they can't come into windows. Since when? Like, I was so disappointed because it's like, what the hell are we doing? Like, these are not the rules. This is not the lore behind the Deadites. Like, they could do whatever the fuck they want. So for Edgar to be sort of like floating there, essentially waiting for his wife to let him in, it's just a continued conversation on these styles of relationships, because then he kisses her as this Deadite, and it's supposed to be this very like grossly romantic moment, but she takes a step back and she's like, you haven't kissed me like that in years. So again, with the abandonment, again, with the almost like emotional abuse, because he's saying all these nasty things to her in his normal self and also in his Deadite self, but she's just like taking it. So I'm just, all in all, I'm incredibly disappointed with this movie. I would go on record to say I don't like it. I don't know how it necessarily got like approved by Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi. Even the gore, I thought that the gore would be something that would save it with the different tricks and things like that, but I felt like it was all predictable. And I also don't know, as a horror genre, when we got so dependent on fucking construction scenes. I'm watching Cape Fear right now on Apple TV, and they have a whole construction scene in their house. Oh, we're renovating our house. Great. Well, we know there's going to be something that's going to happen there. Oh, and guess what? There was. And now we also have a movie from a couple of months ago where they bring everyone into the backyard because, oh, there's this construction scene. We can't go into the house. Now we have that construction scene at the funeral for Evil Dead Burn. And, oh, guess what? Now we're going to have to make our way back there. And all of this construction-based madness is going on. So as we're getting to the end of the movie, dead Will comes back from the dead. Also a point of how did he get back to the house from the crematorium? Did he fly there? Did he drive there? Did he just conjure up from hell? Either way, he got to the house and he was able to open doors and do everything completely fine. And so as the chaos is ensuing, grandma's possessed, mom is possessed, dad is possessed, Joseph is possessed, Joseph's girlfriend is possessed. The only person who's left alive is Alice. And even one of the Deadites talks to Alice and they're like, you have to stop coming in between what we need and what we need from this family. Like, essentially in a nice way, trying to say, like, we're not trying to hurt you, but don't get in our way and help us find this knife. So she's trying to talk to Joseph, who's like in and out of consciousness, of where is this knife? And he's like, well, it's in the house somewhere. So long story short, she goes, she finds this knife, she stabs Joseph, she stabs Will at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, and it gives them their life back, essentially, even though they are dead. So now everybody is dead. As you would imagine, because it is called Evil Dead Burn, she lights the house on fire. And as she lights the house on fire, that's when Will starts walking down the front steps. And he's like, oh, even till death do us part. Like, of course we're not going to part. And I'm still here to haunt you in all your memories. And I know you think about me beating you up on a day-to-day basis. So don't think you're going to escape now, even though I'm dead. So he chases her to the construction site where the funeral was. And they have their final battle. It's pretty good because like she gets trapped in this pit sort of, but it's so predictable. Like, if they're introducing a construction scene in the beginning of the movie that you're going to go back to it because there's all these open holes and nobody's there after dark and all of that stuff. But then as he is a Deadite, he's like still saying horrible things to her. So we're just tripling down on the relationship analysis side of things. But again, she stabs him with the dagger, and that's pretty much it. We also do see another Deadite come to life after the credits. So we know that there's probably going to be more Evil Dead coming soon, which is fine. I will continue to watch them. But I do think from literally every single one in the entire franchise from the beginning, this is definitely the lowest on the totem pole for me. I'm not going to go out of my way and say it's a bad movie, but I would compare this to Scream 4. I like Scream 4. I like Kirby. I think it's kind of fun. But is it good? No. No, unfortunately, it is not. So all in all, to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the actual rating, for the story itself, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I love the story of Evil Dead. I like that they pulled in the grandfather aspect. This is how we have ties as to why this is still going on. It's a new generation of people who want to understand their ancestors, but also kind of are curious. So for story itself, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. For originality, though, I'm going to go at it 2 out of 5. This is in no way, shape, or form original. I do not feel like I've watched anything different than what I've watched before, especially even beginning the movie with a lake. We just saw that 2 years ago with Evil Dead Rise. Like, why are we doing the same thing? So for originality, I give it a 2. For acting, I touched on this a little bit before. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. I think that everybody did their job. I thought, but just not well enough. I thought that Joseph and Joseph's girlfriend kind of did the best. They were the most believable relationship to me. I thought that Alice was it sounds horrible, but I feel like Alice was like a good victim. The only thing I didn't like about Alice was that as we're sort of approaching finale territory, she is about to light this house on fire, and then she starts like crawling around the house. Like, just get up and run at that point. Like, just get out of there. You don't need to be crawling. They can still see you. They can definitely still hear you. So you may as well just like pick up the pace. So for acting, 3. And as I mentioned before as well, like I don't know why they cast that woman as the mom. I didn't believe that she was the mom of that family by any stretch. I thought that she was just, to me, she just didn't fit. So that's my gripe. For production, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I don't like the fact that we're only stuck at the house for the majority of the time besides a construction scene. But like, I would like to see more, more chases through the woods or more dynamic environment. Make it rain outside. Do something other than just like, we're in this room and chaos is going to happen. Because it then starts to almost feel like a rage room. I'm just looking to see what they're going to be doing. That's it. So, and then for scares, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. It's still very scary. It's still very gory. I do think that the gore takes kind of a nudge up for Evil Dead Rise. I think that that's definitely more gory. This has more of a purpose. You know, there's a reason behind each of these attacks or effects or anything like that. It's not just gore for the sake of it being sort of glorified. But yeah, I mean, I would say that if you have a queasy stomach, it's not a movie for you. So all in all, we get 3.4 out of 5, which is relatively low. It's lower than Scary Movie 6, which is kind of crazy. But it's the same as Passenger. And I would say I left Evil Dead Burn feeling about the same way that I did for Passenger. It's not a bad movie, but would I go out of my way to recommend it? Definitely not. I'm going to stick with Evil Dead from 2013. I'm going to go on a limb and say I like Evil Dead Rise a little bit better. I thought Evil Dead Rise pulled from the actual family aspect and more of that like motherhood side of things. This was strictly relationships and still a little bit of that motherhood, but from someone who I think played a horrible mother. So that's my gripe. You know, I know that this review is not necessarily the most optimistic, but I want it to kind of go on record. I'm not shitting on this movie, but I just didn't like it. So if you have seen it, let me know your thoughts. In going with the Shivers group to the movies, I was the minority. Everybody seemed to like it. Everybody certainly liked it a lot more than Evil Dead Rise. So we'll kind of see. It seems like a little bit of a mixed bag. But like I said, if you have seen it, let me know in the comments. Thank you as always for watching, for supporting, for liking, for subscribing. The more that you do that, the more that I can do this, and hopefully you like to hear my reviews and I get to keep going to movies. So thanks as always, and we will see you next week for the next podcast episode for Shivers.